Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Browns Zone Coverage Podcast. This week, the Browns had a golf outing, more OTAs, broke ground on an expansion project in Berea, and got good news from Columbus about the proposed Dome Stadium in Brook Park. Here to break down everything is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. Hey, Chud.
Scott, did you get to golf? Did you take part? Did you show them who the master on the links is?
No, and while I enjoy that golf outing, it's a charity golf outing, and I like being on a golf course, and Westwood is gorgeous. My the bane of my existence is that I'm out there on the course and do not get to take one swing with a golf club. So I've
Yeah.
not been invited to play. I just get to watch. I did see Joe Bitonio take a nice swing. I saw Kevin Stefanski swing. I did not get to play any golf.
I'm sorry, buddy. Well, you know, there's always the next time. There's always the next time.
Right.
You know so many people. You I mean, does it really hurt you that bad?
Well, no, I mean I played the next day, so I don't want
There
to
you
sound I
go.
don't want to sound
Yeah.
like I never get to play golf, but it just stings a little bit to be so close.
That was my job. I was trying to draw that out of you to let everyone know, hey, as bad as it was on Monday, he was out on the course on Tuesday. So,
Right.
you know, but
But
but then on Wednesday, we'll get back to Monday. On Wednesday, you got a chance to see the Browns again with another OTA session, and let's just jump right into it. How did the quarterbacks look? What was the rotation? Break it all down for everybody.
yeah, let's start with the rotation, which again you can't read everything into it. But Kenny Pickett was first up in the first team drill, followed by Joe Flacco. And then when they split up to the two fields, it went Dylan Gabriel first, and then Shadur Sanders was on the second field. And then later there's another team drill where Gabriel was first and then Sanders went. And that's the first time I've seen Sanders in 11 on 11 in the OTAs in the full team practices. Um, again, and I think you can read some into this. He certainly feels like, I want to be careful how I say this. It feels like he's the fourth quarterback in this rotation. You see a lot more of Pickett and Flacco and Gabriel working in team drills, maybe working with the quote unquote first team. But part of that is because they want Sanders to get as many reps as possible. So at the beginning of practice, for instance, they had one set with the other three quarterbacks, and then Sanders down at the other end of the field doing the same type of thing so he could get those reps. And if you have him just standing behind the other three guys, that doesn't serve a great purpose there. So, while it feels like, okay, he's not an afterthought, but he's separate from these guys, the goal is to get him as many reps as possible. So we saw that. He made a touchdown throw in the red zone. Now, everybody, whether it's the ex-police or some of the media with me, we're breaking it down to see if the receiver, Caden Davis, got his second foot in. I don't think that's the biggest issue. The biggest takeaway from this is that Shadur Sanders made a good red zone throw that should have been a touchdown if the receiver gets his feet in. He ended practice on the second field, throwing another red zone touchdown. It was a nice throw. I thought Joe Flacco didn't take a ton of reps yesterday, and I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday, Chud. Or I mean last week when we did this, is he admitted or acknowledged that he is okay getting fewer reps. Now he would like to get as many as possible, but the reality is he's done this for so long, it's year 18, that he can sacrifice a few reps in May and June to get these other guys up to speed better. And I think we saw an example of that Wednesday. He just didn't have didn't get as many reps as the other guys. I will say this: he made what I thought was the best throw of the practice, and people might have seen the clips. I think the Browns put up a clip on X, but he kind of moves right. He's looking to the right side, and when I saw it live, I thought he kind of adjusted at the last minute, but I think that was just him that he wanted the defender to think he was looking to the right. And then he throws a post down the right seam to Cade McDonald. And it was a long ball, wound up being a touchdown. The receiver McDonald had to hold up just a little bit, but it was a really good draw, standing behind the play. It was a good read by Joe Flacco, a good throw by Flacco. And, we've talked about it. He's still got a big time arm. he's got the best arm of these four quarterbacks. And then Kenny Pickett, I thought he struggled. He got more reps. I concentrated on him because I didn't see a ton of him a week ago. And he throws it fine. Like the ball comes out of his hand fine. There's talk about his small hands. He wears gloves, whatever. The ball comes out fine. There were just, I thought, too many risky throws that defenders got their hands on. Denzel Ward had a chance to intercept a couple passes, didn't come away with them. But just a lot of balls on the ground, I thought, in general from the offense, but specifically with Kenny Pickett on Wednesday.
Any movement as far as, and not that you're moving from anything because nothing's really been set yet by the Browns, but just from listening to them talk, and you heard from Stefanski on Monday, Tommy Rees on yesterday, and we'll talk more about him in a second, about what he said. But just from what they've said and what you've seen, any movement as far as where you think the four stand?
I would say no. I would say no with a little bit of caveat that I think we discussed on here. I feel like they want Kenny Pickett to win the job because he gives them a chance to be the long-term answer, whether or not we think that's realistic, because he's 27 years old and Joe Flacco's 40. But the more I see Joe Flacco, the more I think to myself, he should be the guy week one, because I think he gives them the best chance to win especially against a difficult schedule to start the season, but just in general. And you piggyback that with Joe Bitonio at the golf outing saying, I believe that they're going to pick the guy that gives us the best chance to win, which feels like that should be automatic. But I don't know if it is, right? Sometimes you go with the young guy. You go with the guy you need to see as an organization. But Bitonio said he trusts that, I think he used the word faith, have faith that they're going to put the guy out there that gives us the best chance to win games. And as we get a little bit deeper into this, I start to think that could or will be Joe Flacco. I think it's too early to say that, but I do have a little movement that way, I would say. And then the rest of it, no, I think Shedeur Sanders still has a sizable gap to make up with Dillon Gabriel. And that's based on nothing that I've seen in practice. I think Shedeur Sanders has looked better than Dillon Gabriel in the 4 practices that I've gotten to watch the rookies. I just think there's a bigger learning curve coming out of the offense he was in at Colorado. Obviously, the Browns liked Gabriel better because they picked him higher, right? 50 picks higher, 2 rounds higher. When they had a chance to pick Sanders, they took Gabriel. So I just think there's a gap there. I did think, you mentioned Tommy Rees, I did think it was interesting, and I don't know what else he was supposed to say, but I did think it was notable that Tommy Rees said he could envision all 4 quarterbacks winning the starting job. I'm not sure if I agree with that. I think it's a lot harder for one of these rookies to win this job by September, but he said he could envision a scenario where each of the 4 guys does win the job.
But Scott, could that mean not just game one, but this person could be the guy mid-season or eventually be the guy? So it's not necessarily that quote, and that's definitely a quote that got headlines, right? I could see them all winning the job. Doesn't necessarily mean it's week one. It could be at any point.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, Chud. I think you're probably right. I didn't take it like that because I have put so much focus on week one. Who's the starter? But you're right. They could certainly take a broader view of this situation. And, okay, quarterback, veteran X is the starter week one. But, yeah, could you see Dillon Gabriel playing week 7 or Shedeur Sanders starting after the bye week? Yeah, maybe that's how they view it, is a little bit broader. And, that would not surprise me at all if that's how the coaches / organization were viewing this.
The things that stood out from Stefanski on Monday, now he did not talk with you guys yesterday at OTA. He talked with you guys at the golf outing.
Yep.
But a couple things that stood out for me, and I think he talked for about 11 minutes. There was a lot of different things, but as far as the quarterbacks go, the thing that stood out to me was that he said that they've already learned a lot about the quarterbacks, and he said you can't read into what you guys, the media who are there, see because there's so much more going on in the practices that you can't see. So, for example, Shedeur might be getting more work. an 11 on 11 than what you guys might see.
Yes, that is 100% true or accurate what he said. And I believe that to a degree, Chud. I don't necessarily believe that the day we're out there is the only day Shadur Sanders happens to be the fourth guy in the rotation 2 weeks in a row. I that feels a little would be coincidental to me. But I do believe wholeheartedly that it goes way beyond the evaluation process, goes way beyond a throw here, a throw there, what we're watching and breaking down. I'm not saying that's not important, but I do believe Kevin Stefanski when he talks about, how guys read the defenses, how they are in meeting rooms, is a big factor in this. And what I guess big picture, what I mean by that is you got to be able to trust if you're the coach that the guy's going to make the right decision. So if you're in a meeting with him 4 hours a day and he understands every nuance of the offense and why we're throwing the ball here and why this is happening here, that even if it doesn't necessarily translate for one play or there's a bad throw or receiver runs a wrong route that maybe the neutral observer has no idea, that the coaches know who they can trust the most. And I think that is probably the biggest factor. It's who can I trust to get us in the right play if you're the coach, get you in the right play, run it properly, and throw the ball to the right guy. So it's all about decision making. And then you have the accuracy, then you have the arm strength. But first is this guy going to run the right play and throw it to the right spot? And I think that might be easier to judge in a meeting room when you're breaking down film than us just watching a practice.
Let's circle back to Bitonio. You already hit on one of the key points that he said the players want the best QB, the best guy to be the QB, the one who's the best. That's what they want. But let's talk about him for a second. And he still feels he can play at a high level.
Yeah, and it was interesting to me, Chud, because we talked to him at the end of last year, and I thought you could tell that he was torn about whether or not to retire or to return for a 12th season. And he waited a while to announce or to make and then announce a decision. And I remember I went to an event with him. It was, I want to say mid-February, and it was either early or mid-February. So we're talking a month after the season, and he still hadn't decided. So it wasn't just, I'm good to go, count me in. A lot of thought, a lot of discussion with his family. But what it boiled down to was he thought his body felt good enough and he was still playing at a high level and he still wanted to play. And, you see different guys, right? I think Frank Ragnow from the Lions, he just retired, seemed out of the blue after 7 seasons. So everybody's body's different. Everybody's mental state is different. But, Bitonio, I feel like we've known him long enough, it's over a decade, that if he can still play and play well, and he's a guy that's a, borderline Hall of Famer, that he wants to be out there doing it. And he enjoys playing for the Browns. He's got 1 year left on his contract. He just came to the point where, I want to play, and I'm still doing it well enough that let's do it for another year. And I thought he played well last year. I think he was healthier last year than he was in 2023, where there might have been a bit of a slip in his game just due to injuries. So, I like that takeaway from Bitonio, and then he leaves it year to year after this. I asked him, okay, is this it? Or are we going to, is it every year a decision? And he said, first of all, I don't want any kind of retirement, like a year, like a going away thing, So even if he was going to retire, I think he probably wouldn't tell us, so it wasn't a whole year about Joe Bitonio retiring. But I do take him for his word that he's going to judge it after every year, see how the body feels, see if he's still playing at a high level, see if that desire to play is still there. And I would not rule out him continuing to play after the season, of course, depending on how this year goes.
He said some interesting things that I thought are definitely things we should discuss here. Number one, he feels like they're going to go back to kind of like the 2020, 2021 season where they did the outside zone run
Yep.
with the power schemes mixed in. I felt like that was very notable that he mentioned that. And the other thing is, he says they need to keep the defense fresh. It's like when the defense is playing well, it's when they don't have to be on the field as much. And I know that would seem like an obvious statement, but I don't think we really think about that, how much, it's on the offense to produce too, to keep the defense fresh.
Yeah, it gets back to that complementary football they're always talking about. But those are certainly interesting points, Chud. And I'll start with the one about the defense. When the defense of 2023 ranked number one in all those categories, it's third down defense. I don't know. It was, total yardage. They were number one. They were number one in a bunch of categories. A big factor that might have gotten overlooked was the offense was holding onto the ball for a long time, was scoring points. So they didn't need to be out there all day. And then they got turnovers, which helped get the defense get itself off the field. But Joe Bitonio is right. I think if you look throughout time, the best defenses are the ones that aren't asked to be out there a ton. Now, you can help yourself by getting 3-and-outs and getting takeaways. But if the offense has a 3-and-out right away and you're back on the field, it's just hard to play like that. It's hard to be out there. You need those breaks. So that is important. And it ties into going back to, and it's not only going back to the wide zone, which we've always had the sense that they're going to do it. When Kevin Stefanski retook the play calling duties and got rid of Ken Dorsey and promoted Tommy Rees, there's certainly this feeling that, okay, they're going to go back to that offense. But Stefanski's always kind of cagey about it and, we want to be flexible and multiple. But when Joe Bitonio says, when they talked to me about coming back, it was, we're going to go back to this offense. And he goes, as we're doing these installs, it feels a lot like it did in 2020 and 2021. That's confirmation that we're going to see more wide zone run scheme, a bigger commitment to the run game. I think you're going to see heavier personnel than you did last year, which means more two tight ends, whether Harold Fannin Jr., the rookie, is lined up in the slot or on the line or in the backfield. You're going to see more two tight ends, less three wide receivers. So it is a little bit of back to the future with the original Stefanski offense that he arrived in. And I think that also plays into something else Bitonio talked about, Chud, and that's toughness. That he feels like they lacked toughness last year, and it was a physical toughness. Like they didn't run the ball well enough. So the 2-yard and 3-yard runs need to turn into 4- and 5-yard runs, and they weren't good enough up front. And also a mental toughness where he felt the expectations were so high to start the season, and then things started to go bad, and they were unable to get themselves out of that downward spiral. And it snowballed on them. And when they had chances to win close games, they couldn't do it. And that's mental toughness. So he noticed, and Tommy Rees said it too, that Kevin Stefanski and his staff has made an increased emphasis on that kind of toughness and building calluses. And it's hard to do in OTAs in the offseason program because there's no pads, there's really minimal contact. But they're trying to instill that as early as they can because they felt it was lacking last year.
All right, let's move to Jim Schwartz. He talked yesterday, defensive coordinator, and Myles Garrett, once again, not at the OTA there for you guys to see. He did talk about, though, the big headline, I guess, is that he feels that Myles needs to have the best year of his career. He expects him to have his best year. Is that right?
Yeah, he does. And he said, I expect him to, and he has to. And you hear coaches say that all the time. But to me, what separated this quote from others, and he used the Spider-Man quote, to those with great power come great responsibility, or whatever that famous quote is. You hear that, I've heard that quote before. It's not unusual for somebody to say Myles Garrett's going to have the best year of his career because he's such a good player and he's going to take another step. But Schwartz did not hide the fact that he said it because we had the public trade request followed by, which was loud, and we talked about it forever, and it got all kinds of headlines. He's on ESPN and NFL Network talking about wanting to be traded, and you can't win a Super Bowl in Cleveland, and whatever, or they're not ready to win or contend for a Super Bowl. Followed by, okay, I'm staying, and I'm signing a record 4-year, $160 million contract extension. So Schwartz he wasn't mincing words. He's like, yeah, I expect him to be better, and he has to be because he put all this pressure on himself. So the way I wrote it is, yeah, Schwartz put pressure on him by saying, I expect him to have his best year. But Schwartz is really saying that Garrett put the pressure on himself by all the stuff that went on in that month plus in the offseason, capped by this huge contract extension that says, I better be the best defensive player in football.
How about JOK? He talked about JOK as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the sad part of it. And, JOK has not been around. Linebacker Jordan Hicks said he expects him to be around. So did Jim Schwartz. That at some point he's going to be around more, and his personality and him being there and his experience will help the team because he's a really likable guy. His teammates gravitate toward him. In the locker room, you see just guys around his locker like talking to him. He's a thoughtful, deep individual. He's got a good sense of humor, so the players really gravitate toward him. And then he has the experience of being a Pro Bowl player, and Carson Schwarzenegger, the rookie, really wants to learn from JOK. So hopefully we'll see him in the building more and have an impact that way. But we're still at the kind of time of the year where it's what they're going to miss without having JOK. And Jim Schwartz talked about him on the field and that he was starting to play like an all-pro player a year ago. He had made the jump to Pro Bowler in 23, and then he started last year making the jump to all-pro. And, just the playmaking Schwartz said he makes pass coverage look easy. So they're really going to miss him. And that puts pressure on a guy like Carson Schwarzenegger to step in and be able to play right away because I think it's safe to say that JOK was that defense's third best player.
And he had a real quick comment on Mason Graham.
Yeah, they expect him to really be unleashed in this scheme. That he took on a lot of double teams at Michigan. That's what they asked him primarily to do. Yet the Browns, and not just the Browns, if you're watching his film, you still see the explosion. You still see the ability to penetrate the backfield. But they feel like in Jim Schwartz's attacking scheme that Mason Graham will be unleashed.
And Deontay Johnson's still not there, right?
Yeah, and it's a head scratcher to me, Chud. And who knows? Maybe he's got something going on personal. I do not know. And it's voluntary, so I don't want to pick on him. Where we talked about, I don't think it's a big deal at all that Myles Garrett hasn't been there. But, and this feels like a decent-sized but to me, is he's coming off a really tough year. And I think a lot of that was brought upon himself. He's suspended by Baltimore for not going into a game. He's traded twice, cut twice. It seems like a huge year for Deontay Johnson. New team. I don't think there's any guaranteed money on his contract. You just think he would want to establish himself during this voluntary time. So, like I said, I don't know. Maybe something's going on at home. I have no idea. But it is a notable absence that he hasn't been here yet in OTAs.
All right, Scott. I got 4 things left for you, and we just because I eventually have to take a nap here and I'll fall asleep. So we're gonna bring up what we like to call 4 downs with Scott Petrak. Real creative here. Brought to you by Petrak's Pebbles, everyone's favorite breakfast cereal. And so let's hit each topic here. And first down, DeJuan Jones. You got a chance to talk with him.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm writing about him right now. I got a note here to talk about him. Looks better. Looks in better shape. Said he lost 20 pounds and turned it into muscle. So I don't know if he actually lost a pound, but he said he lost 20 pounds of body fat kind of thing. So he's in better shape. They need him to be in better shape because he's just big. 6'8", 374 is what they list him as. I'm sure he's been close to 400. And that's tough on your joints. And he's had that nagging knee injury that he needed to scope after the season. And I think being in better shape will help that. He's finished both seasons on injured reserve, and he needs to stay healthy. He said that's a primary goal for him. He talked about making the switch to left tackle, which he's not thrilled about, but he's trying to embrace it. He feels he needs to be more athletic, which is where the weight loss also comes in. He feels at left tackle you need to move better than you do at right tackle. So it's all tied together. But the reviews have been good. Joe Bitonio said positive things about him. Tommy Rees said positive things about him. And he's crucial because they need him to play at a high level at left tackle for this team, this offense, to come close to doing what the Browns wanted to do.
Second down. What's up with the division talk about the playoffs?
Yeah, I'm with Kevin Stefanski on this. The Lions brought up a proposal, and then they wound up it didn't get voted on at the last league meetings, but they brought it up, and I guess they knew it was going to get voted down, so they removed it from the agenda. But the thought is to base playoff seeding on record and not division titles. So right now, the top 4 seeds go to the division winners, and then the wild cards go after that. So last year, I think Minnesota won 14 games and winds up being a 5 seed, where Tampa Bay, let's say they won 9 games, it was 9 or 10, and they wind up having a 4 seed and host a playoff game. So while that feels a little, I guess, not just like it's not justice for a team with 14 wins to have to go on the road in the playoffs, where a team with 9 or 10 wins. You've seen division champs with 8 wins, or I think there's a 7 to 9 team back in the day. So let's don't give that to the division winners. We're going to base it on record. Kevin Stefanski doesn't like that idea. I don't like that idea. I think you should be rewarded for winning a division title. The schedule is skewed by playing inside your division, so the tougher divisions have it harder than the easier divisions, right? So I just don't think it's equitable enough to say we're only going to base it on record. I think the division matters. It should matter. And therefore, I think seeding should remain the same. But it feels like there's a little bit of a movement heading in the direction of changing that. And part of that, I think, is to make later season or games later in the season more relevant. And if you wrapped up the division title, they're less relevant. But I don't think they should change it.
Yeah, you go down that road and you'll end up like the NBA, where the divisions don't even matter. No one cares about divisions in the NBA.
Exactly. I completely agree with you, Chud. And there's something to be said for coming out of your 4-team division. For the Browns, it's often a juggernaut with Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and Baltimore, and saying, we won that division, and it's not just you won it. And even if, I would assume the division champs would still get a playoff spot, but there should be a sizable reward. And I don't have an issue with a team at 8 or 9 wins even hosting a playoff game. I just don't. I don't think that's something that needs to be changed.
Third down, latest with the stadium.
Yeah, so there's 2 parts. You had the Berea expansion, the expansion of the cross-country mortgage campus. They broke ground yesterday.
God.
Yep.
Scott.
Yo.
That's
down
4th down.
Oh. Well, we're going to go for it on 3rd down, Chud. We don't even need a 4th down. We're just going to score on 3rd down. We don't need a 4th down.
Okay. All right.
So they did that. The first thing, they're going to build like a medical facility with UH hospitals. It's going to allow the Browns players to get treatment close. It's right next door to the practice field. That's going to be the first stage. There's going to be a hotel. There's going to be a community field that's going to be multi-sport and allowed to be used by a bunch of different entities. Berea Mid-Park varsity football is going to play there. It's going to seat more than 7,000 people. Kevin Stefanski was there, and he said the Browns will practice there under the lights at least once in training camp, to allow people to come and watch them under the lights. And there's going to be retail and apartments and this pedestrian kind of area you can walk around in. They think it's going to rejuvenate the north end of Berea. So that was one thing. That's $150 to $200 million commitment project. It's going to take they expect it to take 2 years, fully completion. So to get to your 3rd down, which I jumped the gun, and then you get the stadium. So the reason I'm combining them is because the people on the stage talked about, this being connected to Brook Park. We talked to Dave Jenkins, the COO of the Haslam Sports Group, afterward, and most of the questions were about the stadium, the proposed dome stadium in Brook Park. So the big news there is that the Ohio State Senate came up with a third way to fund the $600 million the Browns are asking for. And this is from like the pension fund, but it's not a pension fund. It's the unclaimed dollars fund in Ohio, which is over $4 billion. And they believe they can take money from there without sacrificing anything for the residents or the citizens, give that to sports teams, and I think there's some other entities that are going to have access to that money. And then that means you don't do Governor DeWine's thing, doubling the taxing on online sports gambling. The House had said they were just going to back the Browns' proposal for the $600 million through bonds. So this is different. The Browns said they're good with any of the plans. But this latest plan, and it's not in stone because the budget's June 30th. There's going to have to be negotiations between the governor, the House, and the Senate. But the fact that each branch has its own way to fund the $600 million has the Browns really optimistic that they're going to get approval for the $600 million. Now, they have to pay it back, and it's expected to be paid back through increased tax revenues from the stadium. That's the plan. But the Browns are confident they're going to get this money from the stadium. And if they get the money, then financially they'll be set to go through with the Dome Stadium. Now they still need, the Modell lawsuit's still in court and all those kinds of things. But the funding, which is the biggest hurdle in their eyes, will be taken care of if they get those $600 million. They're confident it's going to happen, and we'll know for sure June 30th.
All right. Well, the stadium saga continues. I know we have it on almost every morning on Go in the morning. I mean, there's always something lately talking about this. So we'll continue to cover that, Scott, and talk about it. But now I think we're done for today. I think we put in a good effort. I think we get you out on the golf course. I'm going to go take a nap and then get on with my day. And we'll talk next week, right? With mini camp, right? With
it's gonna be a big week. Yeah, big week. 3-day mandatory mini camp. So we'll be out there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Chud. So we'll have 3 practices. Gosh. Yeah, we'll have a ton to talk about. I assume Myles Garrett's gonna be there, Deontay Johnson, all the guys who haven't been there. We'll see. You'll get an idea of who's healthy, who's not healthy. And then that'll send us off to the offseason because then it'll be a long break before training camp. So next week's a big one.
Okay, so I need to pencil in some time to talk next week. That's what you're telling me.
You do. That's what exactly I'm saying. The end of next week, either Thursday afternoon or Friday, Chud, we're going to have to hit it hard.
All right. Okay.
All right.
Hey, and one thing I wanted to say too, cheap plug, starting Monday, we are streaming our morning show live from 7 to 9 on WKYC Plus. So an extra 2 hours on the tube. Well, not the tube, but on the stream.
Well, I know there's probably more work for you, Chud, but for us that don't get up at 4:30 in the morning, that's nice. It's a nice little chance to see you guys because 7 o'clock works better for me than 4:30 or 5.
There you go.
Perfect.
There you go.
All right. Well, good. I'm glad people can tune into that.
Weekend, buddy.
Yeah, you too, Chud. I appreciate it as always. I appreciate everybody listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.